you know, today, September 20th, millions of students and adults around the world are taking action, various kinds of action, to raise awareness and change the course of humanity in regards to climate change and climate impact. We at TASIS today are taking our own action, raising our own awareness, launching our own initiatives. We have had several initiatives at TASIS over the years to lighten our ecological footprint with the goal of making it as low as possible, maybe even carbon neutral. And today is no exception. We do have a lot of work ahead of us. This is a process, not an event, but in a very important time as we increase our efforts, increase our awareness on lightening our ecological footprint. All of you are part of that today and in the future. Today, most of your lessons will have some reference to ecological topics and impact. And so we are raising awareness, but raising awareness is not enough. Taking and increasing our actions and our efforts is ultimately what we're aiming for. And so we'll be launching new efforts throughout next week and throughout the year to continue to move towards that dream of being as carbon neutral as possible, and maybe even zero carbon impact on our environment. And you are all part of that. Also, you are a part of Mrs. Fleming's dream of TASIS coming together to make the world a better place. So we need each and every one of you to participate in that. And so we're really, really proud of all that you are doing and all that you will do in the future. Also, I have to mention, today would not be possible without three teachers whose idea this was and whose inspiration and organization are making today possible. So if you would please join me in thanking Dr. Jill Sawyer-Price, Ms. Valerie Carlson, and Mr. Keith Izsa, who are really, really behind the inspiration for that. I have another Dr. Sawyer to introduce, and so we're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Sawyer with us today. Dr. William Sawyer is an alum of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology at Stanford University. He's a senior computational scientist at the Swiss National Supercomputing Centre in Lugano, Switzerland, an autonomous branch of ETH. He has more than 20 years of experience in numerical analysis for high-performance computing, and he has been active in research at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, the University of Maryland, as well as the Swiss National Supercomputing Centre. He has authored a large number of scientific publications, as well as several numerical software libraries. He has participated in the EU-funded TASIS Green project to promote energy-efficient computation on supercomputers, and has assisted the Max Planck Institute for Meteorology and the German Weather Service to port their atmospheric model, ICON, to highly efficient graphics processing units. Most recently, he has been informing the public about the need for drastic action to address climate change and considering how to use information technology to promote a low-carbon society. We share that dream, so please join me in welcoming Dr. William Sawyer. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So thanks, Chris, for that introduction. I am Will Sawyer, and I do work at the Swiss National Supercomputing Centre. I did at one point work at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. Let me just start off by saying something about Greta Thunberg, who you just listened to. She's an amazing speaker. She's an amazing speaker. Why is that? Well, she simply tells it like it is. She listens to scientists and she repeats what she's hearing. It's that simple. Now, there are a lot of people who call her a pain in the backside. And she is, because pain is something which we need, which human beings need to realize something is wrong here and we have to do something. So I want to start this talk by a confession. I have failed Greta Thunberg. And by that, I mean my generation has failed her generation, and thus your generation. Why is that? Well, it's because we knew about the greenhouse effect in the 19th century already. In the 1950s, we had proof already that human beings were increasing the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson, in a special message to Congress, said this generation has altered the composition of the atmosphere on a global scale through the steady increase of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels. Already 4 years after I was born, a president was telling that to Congress. In the 1970s, 1980s, scientists improved their arguments that greenhouse gases were actually warming the Earth. In the 2000s, they've only made their understanding deeper. There is no question, human beings are altering the climate. And that is why I have failed Greta Thunberg, and thus you. My wish today is that you don't fail the generation which comes after you. I'm trying to make amends. I'll present some of them in my talk. And let's see what we can do about this. So, I do work at the Swiss National Supercomputing Centre. We do really exciting things in climate. I support climate scientists like my colleague David Leutwiler from the ETH in Zurich. And we help these scientists improve their understanding of climate. I won't go into detail here. In fact, I'm not going to talk about this at all. Why not? Because I'm not representing my institution today. It's Climate Strike Day. It's about action now. It's about convincing people, changing policy, and not just making the proof behind climate change more concrete. So that's all I'll say about my work. Greta Thunberg's main message is listen to the scientists. So let's listen to the scientists. Don't even listen to me. Let's listen to the scientists from the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society. These are two of the most prestigious scientific organizations in the world. And this is what they're telling us.
As the sun's rays reach the Earth's surface, some are absorbed and re-emitted as heat. Greenhouse gases, such as water vapor and carbon dioxide, absorb and re-radiate some of this heat. Increased amounts of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere mean more heat is trapped, warming the Earth. Human activities, especially the burning of fossil fuels, have increased concentrations of atmospheric carbon dioxide by 40%, mainly since 1900. Global average surface temperature has increased by 0.8 degrees Celsius over that time. Other changes to the climate in recent decades can be seen in the warming of the oceans, a rise in sea level, decreasing snow and ice cover in the northern hemisphere, and a decline in sea ice in the Arctic. If emissions continue unchecked, then further warming of 2.6 to 4.8 degrees Celsius would be expected by the end of this century. Even at the low end, this would have serious implications for human societies and the natural world.
That's what the scientists are telling us. Humans are changing climate. If you don't want to believe that, you're in good company. I don't want to believe it either. But it's a fact, like going to a doctor who says you have cancer, right? Perhaps you're in denial, but the fact is, you do have cancer. The Earth has cancer. And how is this manifesting itself? There are things happening today which can be definitively linked to some proportion to climate change. Things like extreme weather events. We're seeing an increased number of extreme weather events, extreme intensity events, like the recent Hurricane Irma in the Bahamas. There is drought conditions, extreme drought conditions, which lead to crop loss. Crop loss disrupts the food supply. We're getting mega fires on a scale we haven't seen before. This is a picture from the fire in California, Paradise, California, which killed about 80 people. Rising sea levels. The seas are rising fairly slowly. However, storm surges come up and they inundate whole communities now. And finally, there is migration. Now, migration has many reasons. Basically, you would say people are trying to migrate because they have instability at home. But think about that. A lot of these people are subsistence farmers in places with prolonged drought. They are leaving because they can't produce enough to live anymore. And that comes back to climate change. To some proportion, all of these things have been proven to be related to climate change already now. Okay, so where do the greenhouse gases come from? Well, they come from many sources, and the distribution is a little bit surprising, perhaps. The most greenhouse gases are actually produced in the production of electricity and heat, generating heat. A surprisingly large number comes from agriculture and land use, about a quarter. The things we think about perhaps most, like car transportation, like aviation, flying planes, is actually, about 15%. Industry, also about a quarter. Now, the question is, what nations are to blame for this? Who produced all of these greenhouse gases? And this is a time simulation from 1751, and one nation stands out at the beginning as producing, for decades, having produced the most greenhouse gas emissions. That country is Great Britain, or England. 100% for many decades, until other European nations started to make a considerable contribution. The United States, in the 19th century, quickly grew and used fossil fuels to drive its industrial revolution, resulting in greenhouse gas emissions, total greenhouse gas emissions, which were almost 40% of the total worldwide. In the 20th century, China and Russia started to pick up. India. The UK, at this point, had only produced a fairly small proportion. And we get to 2017, China has produced about 12% of the overall greenhouse gases, the United States, 25%, which is a bit surprising because we talk a lot about China. China produces more today, but over the course of history, the United States has produced about twice as much as China. Well, national greenhouse gas emissions are related to individuals. We all make up a country, right? Individuals make up a country. And so we asked ourselves, well, let's look at individuals. Let's look at you, okay? And calculate your carbon footprint. What is a carbon footprint? It's all the things you do, you eat, the places you travel, they're all producing a little bit of greenhouse gas. Okay? All that together is your carbon footprint, the footprint you are making on the earth. And let's face it, we know you. You use planes, for example. And we conservatively estimated you fly maybe intercontinental outside of Europe twice a year, a return trip, right? and maybe 3 short-haul flights somewhere in Europe, maybe 2 hours each way. Fairly conservative estimate, I found. You like electronics, you like consumer goods, we know that. You like eating meat for the most part. You like eating out, you like getting takeaway pizza, we know that too. On the other hand, you live essentially in a dorm or an apartment, which is relatively efficient. As Chris mentioned, TASIS is doing things to improve their efficiency. I assume most of you don't have a car, which is a big, big deal. Well, we ran the numbers in footprint calculator. Some of you will get to do this today individually. And we came up with you, in this column, and then Switzerland in this column. Well, Switzerland is about 10 tons per year, and with this calculation, you're about at 17 tons. Much more than Swiss average. I looked at it a little slightly different with some bars here. All this purple is transportation, which comes from the flights. Well above the Swiss average. Now, if you were to not have taken any flights, you would be down here, considerably lower than the Swiss average. This is to impress upon you how big a deal it is to fly. We know you don't have options, necessarily. Well, your parents live somewhere else, perhaps. The school takes you on service learning trips all over the world. We're not blaming you. Just be aware that aviation, flying, is a big deal. And you see that it's a big deal up here by the emissions from flying per kilometer, and flying is usually a relatively long trip, right? But there are other modes of transportation, for example, bus and rail, which are much more efficient per kilometer. And we know that's not always an option, but in Europe, it is an option. Okay, so my point in this talk is to impress upon you that things make an impact, and the size of the impact varies, right? It's great if you use a reusable water bottle. It's great if you unplug your phone chargers, but don't believe that that's making a big difference. Those are over here in the low impact range. The things which have high impact are over here. It's not owning a car. It is not flying or using a train where you can. These things make a big difference. And believe it or not, becoming a vegetarian makes a big difference too. These are the things which make a big impact. And we can argue about this having one child less, whether you're responsible for all the footprint of your child. We can argue about that. The point is, we're not asking for individual sacrifice, we're asking you to work together, because only if we do this together, collectively, can we make a real impact. And that's the whole purpose of today, the Global Strike Day. Okay, I'm very interested in solutions, and I want to tell you there is a lot of hope, because as a scientist, we know there are solutions to this problem. And I'll just go through these very quickly. One solution is renewable energy, wind power, solar. In fact, they are some of the cheapest forms of energy now available, much cheaper than nuclear, much cheaper even than coal. What's the problem? Why don't we only have these? Well, it has a big problem. It's intermittent, right? Sometimes you have lots, sometimes you have not so much. And you see that here. This line is the demand. This is your hairdryer, if you like, your oven, your microwave, right? If you're using the power, it fluctuates on a daily basis, goes up and down a little. The wind power, this is for Germany, sometimes is so large that actually it's more than all the hairdryers and ovens and everything. That's a big problem. What do we need? We have to find a way to store that energy when there's a lot and give it all back when we need it. It's a big problem. So we would need something like lots and lots of batteries. Where would we find lots and lots of batteries? How about electric cars? Electric cars, collectively, if we had enough of them on the road, could discharge and recharge. They could charge when there's lots of energy and discharge when the energy is needed. We have that technology now. I talked about aviation. We use kerosene, essentially, to fly. Kerosene has lots of carbon. There's actually a better fuel for aviation. It's hydrogen. Hydrogen, when it's burned, produces no carbon emissions. Much better fuel for aviation. However, we would have to redesign all the planes. Hydrogen requires a lot of volume, so you need bigger planes, different planes, and you need a new system to refuel them. Billions of dollars investment. Where is the money going to come from? Well, one possibility is carbon taxes. You pay for the damage you do to the environment. There's different schemes. This one in British Columbia, every dollar raised is a return to people. So if you do a good job of managing your carbon footprint, you get much more money back than you pay for the carbon. One approach to addressing the damage from carbon emissions. So, last two slides, what needs to change? Well, society needs to change fundamentally in dramatic ways, and we have to have different attitudes. Right now, we still believe that growth, GDP, is the most important thing for us. We need to think not in terms of just growth, but prosperity. What makes our life better? It's not necessarily more that makes our life better. We live in a world of convenience, right? It's not necessarily healthy, right? Maybe we should think more in terms of health. Construction, old building, rip it down, build a new one. Turns out that's very carbon intensive. You have to think more in terms of renovation. We have so much. We should need to stop thinking in terms of quantities. Don't necessarily make our life better, but we need to think in terms of sustainable solutions, sustainability. Novelty, new iPhone every year. Maybe we need to think in terms of quality of objects so that they last. Productivity, very central in our society. We have to think more in terms of usability. Globalization is, Earth is becoming smaller. We travel here, there, and everywhere. We need to be more involved in the community and make the community a nice place, because that will naturally reduce our mobility footprint. So there are different approaches to this. What is required is a new economics for a no growth or little growth world. And this is called the donut economics. It's based on two principles: that you have some boundary on the outside, your ecological ceiling, right? And those are the limits beyond which we endanger the earth we're living on. The ecological limits, if you like. And then on the bottom, we have a social foundation. We have to have an equitable world. If there's too much inequality in the world, it will naturally become unstable. And so I thought a lot about this. How can we enable this change to society? And in some ways, people like me are total hypocrites, because we have international partners. I have in the past traveled internationally to meet these partners, and only recently I realized, no, I won't do that anymore. And I know many people in my sector who would change their life if they knew how to and still were to be able to pay the bills. So I thought a lot about this, and what I would like to do is form a non-governmental organization which concentrates on the technologies needed to live a low carbon lifestyle, tailored to individual communities and individual countries. And because I'm a computer modeler myself, obviously that's central to the plan. But it's much more than that. It can't only be technology. It's also about individuals. So I thought about this. What can we, the scientists, do? Well, we have to be people who want to change society, not look for a big salary, and we have to be willing to put our money where our mouths are. Namely, to commit to a carbon footprint which is less than half of the national average. It's more than even individuals. We want to act as role models, but we want the community also to become aware of this. So that's why this toe print organization puts their intellectual property into the public domain. It doesn't matter who makes the product as long as it's ultimately improving society. And obviously we want to grow the community and help change the laws and attitudes in our society. Okay, so let me leave you with a couple of hopes for this climate day. One is face the challenge. Don't shy away from it. Don't deny it. It's a challenge. You have to face it. Don't feel helpless, because that's a waste of your energy to feel helpless. It's not about personal sacrifice. I don't want one of you to make a carbon footprint which is only a tenth the size. I want all of you to be aware and maybe minimize your carbon footprint in a modest way. Be hopeful. As a scientist, I can tell you a low carbon society is possible. But you have to be informed, and that's what today is all about. In particular, distinguishing between science, scientific thinking, and misinformation. You have to be able to read the things, and then judge if it's reality or not. Understand what makes a difference. Unplugging the phone chargers, frankly, it's not going to make a big impact. Taking 1-2 international flights less per year, big impact. We have to affix a value to the environment, because the environment gives us services, right? It gives us something. There is a value to our clean water, which nature provides for us. Make informed choices, right? You are adults now. You have to think for yourselves. The problem is not the technology, right? We know what technologies can be made available. The problem is societal, it's financial, it's economic, it's political. Finally, you have to be responsible. You are damaging the environment with your carbon footprint, flying to Dubai. You have to be, I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying be willing to pay for the damage you're making, which is several $100s for a trip to Dubai, for example. As I said, I'm trying to make amends for failing you, but I'd like you not to fail the generation which comes after. And with that, I'd like to say, in Greta Thunberg's words, we can solve this. Have a great climate day.
Hey everyone, my name is Daisy and I'm in 12th grade. I have a question for you. When you see a bottle or a piece of paper lying on the ground, do you go straight over to pick it up and put it in the recycling bin or even the trash? Be honest, raise your hand. Yeah, I thought so. Now, raise your hand if you expect someone else will come by and do the right thing by picking it up and putting it back. Raise your hand. Most people should do that. They shouldn't do that. Most people just sit and wait for someone else to do it, but who's actually doing it? It's the same thing here with climate change. We are waiting for someone to take over this huge task, all thinking someone else is going to do it. How awesome would it be if we could solve it together? You've seen the research, you've seen the truth, and the truth is that you can and we can do this by doing little things. Have you ever heard the saying, many hands make light work? I'm not saying we're perfect, and I know it's hard, but I'm telling you right now that you can do so much right now just by doing these little things. You can eat more meat-free meals. Meat takes up so much water and produces methane and CO2. It's also the reason the Amazon forest is on fire. They're burning it to make more room to raise cattle. Actually recycle. And don't just throw things in the wrong bins. Let's be real, it's not that hard. Don't waste electricity. Unplug your computers, your phones, etc. when you're not using them. It's small, but it makes a difference. Turn out lights when you leave your room or the classroom. Use a reusable bottle. Print double-sided, or just print less. Clean up after yourself and others, so littering becomes less. Avoid single-use plastics, straws, plastic cups, utensils, plastic bags. Take shorter showers. And most importantly, create new ideas and don't be afraid to share them. We are here to learn. We are here to do something. If we don't do something, then who will? And if you do these things all the time, you're actually helping to solve climate change. It's time to wake up. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Ella and I'm in 12th grade. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak to you today about something I'm so passionate about, our environment. I strongly believe that we are all beyond blessed to live and coexist with nature in our beautiful world today. And most of us take our earth for granted. Most of us don't give back. As a community, we should all be taking initiative in creating a change for our environment. I can't tell you how many Instagram and Snapchat stories appeared on my feed this summer of posts of fire in the Amazon and pictures of marine debris in the oceans. And trust me, I think it's incredible that we're using our modern day technology and our social media platforms to raise awareness. But what else are you doing other than just reposting a picture? Are you recycling? Joining a local service group? Going out and actually speaking to people face to face to inspire them to get involved in protecting and preserving our planet. We need all hands on deck to clean up our mess and shelter our environment for our futures and the generations to come. As Dr. Seuss's wise lyrics once said, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Take initiative, get involved, create a positive change. Thank you.
Hello there folks, we are ready to wrap up right now. On Monday, Greta Thunberg, Nobel Prize nominee at the age of 16, is speaking to the UN. None of us have been invited to speak to the UN, but there's a lot every single one of us can do every day, every week. Think about some of the reasons that you want to be involved in making this world still a beautiful place to bring up your children.
I just want to say thank you to all the teachers taking time out of the day to prepare lessons, dealing with this important issue. Like Ms. Sawyer-Price said, next week, United Nations will convene in New York City to discuss the progress of their Sustainable Development Goals. Students, today you learned about being a social entrepreneur. You learned about companies who today are making a difference. So, start that green business, recycle your products, invest in companies who share your values. And in the words of the great Sebastian Maniscalco, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Have a great day.
Mr. Nikoloff mentioned that we're going to be doing some things at TASIS recycling, reusable water bottles with a terrific slogan on them. I encourage you to check those out in Denobly. They'll be selling them at various points and probably online as well. Our first family-style dinner for the year, which is next Wednesday, is having a sustainable, organic, local theme. So our thanks to Ms. Pinton and the kitchen for bringing that idea to us once they heard we were doing this day. We have two new local service groups, Environmental Action and Ethical Gardening, that are running for the 10th grade, but I know there are a lot of people in older grades who want to get involved with the Green Team, and we're really excited to welcome you. Finally, in October, new recycling bins are going to be coming to key points around campus that don't have them, like the Palestra, like Hadsel, like Denobly, and they're going to have multiple bins. So you'll be able to put your plastic, your cans, your metal, your paper, your trash, and your glass all in those bins. If we do it right, TASIS will recycle. If we do it wrong, everything goes in the garbage. So it's going to be up to all of us to make that happen. And now we're going to let you go with, as Daisy said, you need to wake up, so we're going to leave you with a song as you exit. Thank you.